We have our friend Edgar Camacho joining us here from Mexico City. So Edgar, feel free to turn on your camera whenever you're ready. Say hello.
Hi
Okay.
everybody, how are
Hey,
you?
Hey, Edgar.
good to see you.
How are you? How you doing?
Great,
Holding up.
Great,
great.
great. So what
I'm
are
going
you guys
to.
talking about?
Just
We're
comics, you know.
just wrapping up talks about our upcoming books.
Great. So
Let me pull up a couple slides again just to remind everybody. For those of you who are just joining us, thank you so much. I'm Lee Walton. I'm invisible right now. And I'm on staff at Top Shelf, marketing director and one of the editors there, and been working with these great authors to put out their books. I'm going to do a quick screen share in case you're just joining us. This is the new book from Kim Dwinell, which will be coming out in a couple months in July. She's done two previous Surfside Girls graphic novels, and this will be the newest one in which Sam and Jade learn about science and the ocean. So biology and physics and how to surf and how to be a good steward of the ocean in a way that's really accessible for that sort of tween audience and the middle grade readers. So we're very excited about Science of Surfing. Let me also pull up, oh gosh, I've lost the window now. Jarod Roselló has been here and will continue to chat into the next bit about his series Red Panda and Moon Bear. There's just one book out in that series so far, but book two is coming up fast. You're finishing it up right now, Jarod, and
Yep,
it'll be
yeah.
out in January. Uh, so I'm going to screen share that real quick, just as a reminder. Folks, if you haven't got Red Panda and Moon Bear for your library, your kids are going to love it. Jarod was saying, especially sort of third to fifth grade has been the primo audience for that, but it could skew a little older and a little younger. And we'll be talking more about Red Panda and Moon Bear in the next hour. And Edgar Camacho has just joined us here, and I'm going to pull up some art from his book, which is called Onion Skin. Edgar, can you tell us a little bit about Onion Skin?
yeah, sure. It's a book for young people, for young adults, and it's about a crazy adventures, but with a touch of everyday life. You know, it's about food trucks, and it's about learning about yourself, finding the way that you want to make your dreams come true. And I love making this book. In here in Mexico, it was won. It won the Mexican Graphic Novel Award. That is a very big thing here. It's just opened the door for many young artists here in Mexico, and now is his debut in the international market with Top Shelf with you guys. That it's an honor for me, and I'm very excited about this.
Wonderful. Well, Kim, I know you may need to head out, but thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Hello to the librarians who are joining us now.
thanks for setting this up, and great to meet all you Texas librarians. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye. Good to see everybody.
Thanks,
Hi, Kim.
Kim. For those of you just joining us, we're chatting with Jarod Roselló and Edgar Camacho, two really, really exciting Latino graphic novelists. Jarod is based in South Florida, and Edgar in around Mexico City. So if you have any questions for Jarod and Edgar, feel free to chime into the chat here in the conversation. And if you're watching in the booth, hello to you folks as well. Maybe we can get started by introducing the characters. Edgar, do you want to talk about the two main characters for Onion Skin?
Yeah, the main characters are Rolando and Nera. Rolando is a guy who doesn't know what to do with his life. He's just lost the way, and now he want to change his lifestyle. You know, making something exciting, and he doesn't know how. and he's very square. He's very he doesn't he followed every rule. He's just like a little bored guy, but Nera is everything opposite of him. And together they complementate themselves. And she is very extroverted. She likes to say what she's thinking of, and together find herself in an adventure with a road trip in the roads of Mexico, and that's pretty much it.
That's wonderful. Jarod, can you introduce the characters for your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So Red Panda and Moon Bear is about Red Panda and Moon Bear, these two Cuban-American siblings. They're kind of second generation kids, sort of born and raised in the town of Marti, which is a sort of kind of like a fictional combination of like Miami or Tampa, but like a place in South Florida with a large Cuban-American population. They've got these two magic hoodies that they found mysteriously that give them superpowers. So Red Panda believes that she has the power of 12 red pandas. And and Moon Bear has a magic crystal that gives him these sort of unspecified magic abilities that respond to his emotional state. So he's kind of in control of them, but not quite. And Red Panda is also big into machine building. So she can build kind of anything she can think of or imagine. And so she's always building sort of contraptions and strange machines or weapons, depending on what villain they have to fight. And so they live in their town and they're the defenders of their neighborhood. And mostly they've been, saving lost animals and fighting bullies and doing those kinds of things. But one day sort of monsters start appearing and buildings go missing and trees start coming to life. Strange kind of supernatural things start happening. So they become these sort of larger than life superheroes who have to spring into action and protect their neighborhood and try to figure out what exactly is going on to cause all of this to happen.
That's wonderful. And oh, we've got some folks in the chat here. So thanks for joining us, everybody. One question I wanted to ask both of you guys is sort of about the level of fantasy and that plays into your work. Edgar, I sort of get the impression, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that the audience in Mexico for your book was a little bit surprised at how realistic it is. That maybe the comic book tradition in Mexico is mostly about fantasy, and that it seemed to be something new to have these adventures focused on ordinary people mostly living an ordinary life, even though there are some fantasy parts. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, here the topics for the comics really there are about superheroes and a lot of like American comic books. But recently, and when this book came out here in Mexico in 2016, it was very brand new topics about everyday life, about every ordinary people, about their problems. And I think it was a very good surprise for the audience to see this kind of story on the comics. And it's about like I draw and I talk about everyday life, but with a twist of craziness, like, yeah, it's about two guys, but then something happened and having these crazy adventures around the country. So this is not very common here in Mexico, but by the end of the day, there are a lot of national authors here who are talking about these things, about things that happen to this generation, young adults, and other topics about other than superheroes and fantasy and other things. Everyday life is just a really good topic to talk about.
That's wonderful. Jared, we were talking a little bit in the last hour about how your books are driven by a sort of sense of place. Do you want to maybe recap some of that for the folks who have just joined us?
Yeah. So it's grounded in this town, and really I think the whole book takes place in about 3 blocks. And the way that I had sort of conceived this was, if you're a Doctor Who fan, it's sort of right. It's larger on the inside. It's that same kind of thing, and it was playing off of the idea of, as kids, you would go play in your backyard, let's say, or to the park in your neighborhood, and it seemed enormous and huge, and there were so many areas you could go to. But if you revisited those as an adult, then maybe they weren't so large. And so I wondered if part of the magic of this setting was that the town itself responded to the kind of whims and desires of the kids also. And so magic wasn't just magic spells, but also this idea that anything was possible at any moment, that they could jump into a sewer drain and suddenly they would be inside these secret underground caverns and defunct laboratories, and that none of it would make any logical sense, but that was kind of the point. And so the setting itself became the project became how to unfold the setting and how to make the setting sort of never explained or never bounded, but instead a place that constantly unfolds and reveals new things that are there. So they could chase a monster down an alleyway, but I could have that alleyway go for miles if I needed to. And so that became, right, at first it was a sort of trick of storytelling, like how could I tell this big story in this small space? But once I started doing that, it also had a kind of reflexive effect in which I started to think of every alleyway as a magical space, and every abandoned building as a site of possibility. Every manhole cover could have a monster beneath it, and then having the kids kind of explore this place and continue to unfold it and open it up and unpack it. And so while there is actual magic, like Moon Bear does have a magic stone that does magic spells, the real magic of this setting is that anything could kind of happen, or anything is sort of possible within this space. And nobody's ever surprised that it's happened.
Which is sort of the way that it works when you're a kid, because you
Yeah,
don't understand the world, and things happen that are surprising to you all the time. And so this might as well happen too.
Yeah, and I think it kind of felt like growing up, like me and my siblings and my friends, we were in Miami, the first generation born here in the United States. And so we had a sort of narrative that our parents were giving us about what life was like. And we had like contemporary American culture giving us a narrative. And I think they weren't compatible. And I think what it suggested to us was that the narrative of who you are is fiction and is constructed. And because we had sort of like 2 competing forces that created this little bubble for my generation, it was up to us to decide what it would actually look like. And I think inadvertently, it was really empowering for us to decide, well, we don't have to choose this, or we'll take the pieces we like and let's make something new altogether. And so I think I was really inspired by just growing up in Miami and the sort of, I don't know, the sense of possibility. All of our parents and grandparents were like, go do great things, but nobody could tell us how to do these things. They just shoved us out into the world and we're like, but you have to do it too, right? Like, we came here for this, so go make it happen. And so all of the kids in my generation felt like we were filled up with all of this potential energy, like, all right, go make this magic happen. And it was just up to us to figure out how and what that would look like. And I think I just channeled all of that into these kids and into this book.
That's really beautiful. It reminds me of some of the things in Onion Skin, where Nera, the girl character, is inheriting these recipes and this love of cooking and this special plants, these herbs from her grandmother. And it's something that's very emotional for her as she's trying to figure out, both of these young people, like you're saying, Jarod, they feel this sense that they have to do something with their life, but they don't know what. And in Red Panda and Moon Bear, they're just kids, whereas in Onion Skin, Edgar's talking about adults who they're like, okay, it's time to do it, but I don't know what to do. And they sort of help each other. Edgar, did you feel that that was something that you felt from your family? A pressure to do something with your life and to carry on some kind of tradition?
Yeah, my father, he wanted me to be an engineering, like really no science guy, nothing to do with comics or drawing. And my mother wanted to be a doctor, like you want to be a dentist or something more like just drawing comic. But always on the way, they always support me, and no matter what, they like, well, if that's what he want to do, just go for it, even if they want me to do something else with my life. It's just how the things turns out, and now I'm drawing comics, and no one in the family is a doctor, and that's the way it is. And now my mother have grandchildren, and she is very excited about that, like, oh, maybe them will be a doctor someday, but I don't think that it's going to happen. So on the way, it's always they're always supporting me, and that's something I always going to be grateful.
That's wonderful. I'm just looking for some of my favorite scenes in the book here.
I wanted to say too. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say I had a chance, Edgar, to read your book, and it's brilliant and incredible. And one of the things that I really liked about it, as you're like these two characters who want something to happen so badly, and I was really struck by your drawings, which always they feel like there's like a kinetic energy to them. The lines themselves, like they're still images, but they always feel like they're moving or they're shaking, or that the lines themselves are even just kind of vibrating on the page. And I don't know, it conveyed in me such a sense of urgency and a sense of kind of desperation that I felt like at any time, anything was going to happen when I turned that next page. And of course, so many incredible things do happen in this book too. And so I felt really inspired just by your line art.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure, I'm very glad that you say that. And yeah, my drawing is very, I think it's dynamic and very, the lines is just the tangents, it's something that I love a lot, how they cross these lines, and you don't know if there's the arm of one person, of the background or something, you just go with the movement of the line. And thank you very much. And I also read your book, and it was very fun to read, the characters, the things that they say, it's like a kid, a child will say to you, how they answer, like, it's one part in your first book that you say, let's fight with drawings, let's defeat the evil drawing. It's just, I love that part of the book.
Yeah, thank you.
I gotta find that scene because that's one of my favorites too. It's actually like the climax of the whole book one, isn't it, Jarod?
Yeah, it's kind of how they repair the damage that's been done after they defeat the last villain, which is that the universe itself, like the very fabric of existence, has been like destroyed, and so they repair it by drawing. They have I was trying to make this joke, those like universal repair kits or universal kits, and so Red Panda has a universal repair kit, except it's literally a universal repair kit. It actually repairs the universe. And so it's in the form of an ink bottle, and they take some nibs and they redraw the universe, and that's how they fix it.
That's terrific. Edgar, what can you tell us about who is reading, or who reads Onion Skin and has given you the best feedback? Is this a book for adults? Is this a book for teenagers, or sort of people in the middle who are trying to find an identity? Maybe you can help the librarians as they're talking to their communities and trying to figure out who should I recommend this book for.
It's mainly focused on young adults, but in my experience, when I was presenting the book, many teenagers identified on Rolando's quest. It's like even if it's for a little grow-up audience. A lot of teenagers identify with this quest of finding yourself. Of a struggle with the life that you have supposed to live and the things you really want to do. So in my experience here in Mexico, promoting this book, a lot of teenagers go for it and like a lot, you know, like they identify with Nera and with Rolando's on this is what I want to do, but I don't know how, but I want to make the first step. I want to do something without knowing if I'm going to have succeed, you know, just go for it. And I think it's for that audience, you know, I want to say for everybody, but I think young adults will be more interested, but teenagers will find something for themselves in this book.
That's terrific. Jarod, what have you found to be the best audience for your book?
Yeah, I mean, it's a broadly a sort of middle grade book, but I found that grades 3 through 5 tend to kind of like, it tends to sort of hit with them the hardest. I've had a couple of younger kids, like a couple of like first and second graders, also who like it, and even some older kids. If you have like middle school kids who are really into like Gravity Falls and Adventure Time, they'll sort of like the sort of adventurousness of it also. But yeah, 3rd through 5th graders seem to be the ones who like it the most.
That's great. My next question was sort of about Texas. Do you guys have any experience visiting Texas, or do you feel any connection to the communities there?
I've never been to Texas before, so I haven't been there. The only thing I can say is that I was really, I read a lot too, and spend a lot of time. And so the work of like Gloria Anzaldúa and the work that she's done on the borderlands helped me a lot in conceptualizing and kind of understanding what kind of border being a 2nd generation Cuban American kid was, which is of course very different from a geopolitical border. But that I try to sort of think through some of those concepts and ideas as I'm working through. And so I think work from Texas and scholars and writers from Texas have been very influential for me. So.
In my case, I haven't been in Texas, you know. I just in the United States, I only go to California in San Diego Comic Con. Is the only place I don't know a lot of things. Even here in my country, I don't travel a lot, but I hope one day do it. So to learn about other things, how to perceive the Mexican comic authors, you know, because I have a lot of interest in that, because I consume a lot of your comic books in North America, but I love to see more authors, you know, Latin authors. What have they say to the people, you know? I think that's it.
That's great. Do you feel that when you work, you're doing it as a Latino author? You know, do you identify with Latinidad? Is that important to you when you're making your work?
I guess for me, like being in the United States always sort of feels like, I guess when I left Miami, I should say, it felt like something that I had to constantly claim repeatedly over and over again. And so when I'm making my work, though, I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just like telling the story that I want to tell with the kids that I want to tell it about, and just, you know, reminding me of like, you know, the kid that I was as a kid, and, you know, my friends and that sort of thing. But it's usually when my book is out in the world and I'm talking about it, that I'm reminded that, you know, I think being Latino in the United States is like a contested space, and something that is constantly, it's contested from all sides, you know? And so there are times where I'm like, I'm not Cuban enough for other Cubans, and I'm too Cuban or too Latino for, you know, other white Americans. And so when the book enters out into the world and I engage with other communities, that's usually when I think about it a little bit more. But usually when I'm telling my stories, I want to tell a great story about characters that I love, and things that sort of reflect, you know, what I'm thinking about and what I'm imagining. But there was definitely an era of of decolonizing my own storytelling, you know, where I remember growing up and every winter scene was set with snow, even though I'd never seen snow as a kid. And so I think, you know, there are certain geographic and geopolitical areas within the United States that have a kind of colonial grasp on what stories look like and how they should be told, and that it takes some kind of undoing to sort of get beyond that. And so,
Yeah, I mean, in my case, indirectly, my whole thematic on the book, the whole thing is the struggle that my generation has here and now, you know, and especially here in Mexico. We have a barely paid job, you know, very bad salary, and we have to do that. And making comics, you know, it's very common here in Mexico that the authors have another source of income, you know, and I think I reflect the reality of my country without being a direct criticism. You know, it's just something that is there because I live in it. And of course, it reflects the part of me in Latin America that is the struggle with the generation, you know, with poor paid jobs and have a lot of things to do, don't have time, don't have money, but you have to do it anyway. So I think, yeah, it reflects a lot of Latin culture.
Edgar, I really love the scenes where Rolando is explaining how frustrating his day job is. He's he's an artist, but he's doing this sort of graphic design work for some commercials that he really doesn't care about, and his boss makes him redo the same piece of graphic design 5 or 6 times.
Yes, I
And that's
mean,
something that I think,
it's like it's something that is not important, you know, like a promo in a store, like 2 for 29, you know, hot dogs, and it's like, who did it? Nobody cared, you know. But the people who are making it, they really are tough, you know, like it's had to do this, it has to do that, and you're like, but nobody cares, but you have to do it anyway, you know. And it's really difficult because as a graphic designer on my own, I have struggling with that, you know, with those changes of last minute. Everything is urgent, everything is for today, but things that really don't have a long life, you know, like this promo, it will be in the store like 2 days, you know, and you were late on the office, working late, and nobody cares, you know, by the end of the day.
and so maybe making comics and making books is a way to work on something that's going to last,
Yeah,
you know. Can you
yeah,
talk about the comics that you read that inspired you to want to make comics? Both of you?
sure. I mean, I read a lot of American comics, and I grew up watching a lot of TV. When I was a kid, I watched the Batman animated series, you know, like the 90s with the team of Bruce Timm, and that's really something that to make my career, you know, make it that storytelling. And Mad Love of Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, that comic book is just a reference to me today, you know, how to tell a story in a couple of pages and make it really strong. And I have a lot of reference here in Mexico, you know, like there is an author called Carlos Vélez, whose work is just with no dialogue, you know, and I love pages without dialogue, you know. I, I express myself, I think, drawing and writing, so I love a lot of comics without dialogue. And that's a lot of my influence, but that's a couple of them.
yeah, I think when I didn't grow up reading comics, and it wasn't until I was a teenager that I started reading them. But when I was a kid, I really loved cartoons and animation, and like 90s Nicktoons were like huge for me. And when I was 18, I went to a comic book shop, and I was like, oh, this is just like animation, but they're just here printed on the page. And so I started one of the first comics I pulled off the shelf was Jeffrey Brown's Clumsy, which is a top shelf book actually. And that was the first time that I pulled open a comic and I was like, wow, I can see the pen marks. I can see exactly how this book was made. And like a light bulb just went off in my head and I was like, I could make comics too. I like drawing and I like stories and I like cartoon characters. And I think it was that book sort of revealing its materials to me that showed me, hey, here's how you make this. And I had no idea how you make animated cartoons, but I could see just by reading comics how you make them. And so it felt instantly sort of accessible to me. And so I did afterwards go and get a job. Yeah. And so this is such a great example here, right? There's really nothing complex in terms of like the lines that are being used here, right? All very sort of simple shapes, although it's very I would say sophisticated cartooning, but on a sort of like kind of back end sort of thing. This is the teacher in me coming out now. But anyway, but I remember looking at this thinking, oh, I could see where how the hand had to move to make these shapes. I could tell these stories. And they're, really kind of endearing. And it also reminded me that there's a larger world of comics out there. So I started reading that early on. Also Craig Thompson's Blankets, another top shelf book, and Goodbye Chunky Rice were two that I really loved a lot. There was a collection by Walt Holcomb. And the name of that collection escapes me, as a Fantagraphics book, but it was all of the kind of really cartoony work too. So cartoony stuff that was kind of simple with, sort of thicker wobbly lines that was sort of calling out to me. And that inspired me to start making comics. And so, yeah.
I love that both of you have scenes where your characters are making comics. It seems like that's something that we all kind of like to do or like the idea of doing, but at a certain point when you're growing older, something happens to you and you say, oh, I can't do it. I'll leave it to the real professionals.
Yeah, I think that, we live in a culture that at some point values writing and text over image making. And so, if you want to, if you want to read more and get access to, text-based work, you're going to find a lot of support for that work. But for a long time, at least when I was a kid, also growing up, if I wanted to draw and I wanted support for my drawing, there wasn't a lot of resources that I had available to me. And so, it's one of those things where when you don't have a structure around you that's telling you this matters, and when you have maybe implicit or explicit voices telling you that cartoon drawings don't matter, it's easy to sort of give that up and focus on things that you're being told do matter. And it's really unfortunate because I feel like for me, I in some ways that I lost like a decade of my cartooning life because it took me all of my 20s to get back to where I knew I wanted to be when I was like 17 and 18, because I was trying to figure out how to make this thing work. And so I feel like kids today are drawing comics so often. It's such a regular part for many of them, of their lives, that it's so wonderful and great to just see that they can pull out paper, pull out pencils, pull a graphic novel off the shelf and just start making things.
Yeah, in my case, when I was a kid in kindergarten, everyone drew, every kid drew. But then you start growing and you have another interesting, and I keep drawing, I keep drawing, and the other people go to play soccer, go to form a band, play the guitar, go out having dates, other interesting that you have in your life. But I just keep drawing, and that's what I love to do. And I don't know, I have a lot of other interesting, but I never stop drawing, and I think it's and now it's my job, but I don't know, it's just fun to draw comics and live of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, I'm sorry, Lee.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's a really great point to make too, that it's the idea of making comics is great, but they're so tedious and time consuming that I think you also need to enjoy the act of drawing, like of mark making on paper or digitally, in order to kind of sustain the practice long term. And I was definitely, just like you, Edgar, the kind of kid who I just kept drawing. And I sort of, even though I was just doing it in my own sketchbooks and I wasn't thinking about doing anything seriously, I just kept doing because I liked the act of drawing. And maybe you're like me, where if there's a piece of paper and a pen near you, you're gonna doodle on it, no matter what's happening. You can't not do it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of mark making, Jarod, you brought up something a little bit earlier in the conversation that I want to sort of hone in on here. I've got to pull up my high resolution files, but when people get the final book, they'll really be able to see this. One of the interesting things about Edgar's style is that you can see the marks. You can see a lot of times a pencil mark from his sketch underneath the final inking. And it reminded me of what you were saying about Jeffrey Brown. Edgar, maybe you can talk about why you do it this way, and is it faster? Does it give more energy to the artwork? Makes it more fun? Makes it feel like the reader is a part of this? It's not perfect and clean and untouchable. It's very touchable.
I think it gives to the book a lot of character, and those lines, it's on purpose. It's where I was start writing, defining my own style, and have a lot of influence in other artists. And there is one artist that before everything was digital in comics, everything was to be perfect, like the inking, it was a process, it was a people who doing that, the color was another person. And now with these author books, we have to do everything. So I start thinking, I love how to look the pencil and the color together. So it doesn't have to do a perfect inking. So an artist here in Mexico called Patricio Beteo, he do a lot of that things, he start coloring their pencils without inking. So I think it was great. And another artist that I like a lot that actually, well, he worked with IDW on Samurai Jacks. It was Warwick Johnson Cadwell. And I loved his styles, how he drew the lines. He is not perfect, but it's great. It's so dynamic. And I think it's not faster because I have a process, but I think it's very energetic and dynamic. So it gives the sense that it's not perfect, but it's had a lot of character, and I like a lot.
Yeah, we talked about how Red Panda and Moon Bear live in this community, and the buildings really have character, and the color of the community and the light, the pastel colors and everything really reminds you of a specific place and a specific time. It doesn't look like every other city in the world. And I think the locations in Onion Skin are also full of character. This doesn't look exactly like any place that I've ever been, but it looks like a real place, and I can imagine myself going there just because there's life coming out of the images. It looks like a really cool rock and roll club where I want to go see the best show that I've ever seen in my life,
Yeah, and it's a combination about the place where I live and Mexico City. It's not like Mexico City exactly, but it's where I live. And Mexico City is just like a city that just exists in my mind, but represents the way that I see the landscape where I'm living.
Great. Folks, if you're watching, you have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat. We're here, for those of you just joining us, with Edgar Camacho and Jarod Roselló, talking about Edgar's upcoming book, Onion Skin, is going to be out next month. This is what we're looking at right now. And Jarod's book, Red Panda and Moon Bear, is a series for middle grade readers. First book has been out for a little while, and the second book is going to be coming out in January. Um, so maybe we can talk about what you're reading now and what gets you excited to come to your drawing board every day.
Edgar, you want to go first?
All right. I am reading a lot of online comics. I haven't been, because I'm in a new project that is for online development. So I'm working now for that kind of format, where it's in the cell phone and it's the scrolling. So it's a very new format for me, and I'm trying to experiment with that. So I've been reading a lot of digital comics, a lot of, and especially one author that is from Mexico, but he now lives in Japan, is Raúl Treviño, and now he's making digital comics now, and his series Life Forever. That's what I'm reading now, and what I'm drawing, it's a lot of kids. I'm drawing a lot of teenage stuff, a lot of school things, and it's been a real fun, but a really pain in the ass, because I'm not a teenager anymore, so it's really difficult to know what is happening in those ambients, when you are out of there. So that's I'm into now.
Yeah, I'm 6 days away from the end of the semester teaching, so I'm like deep in not having a ton of time at the moment for these last couple of weeks. But I do have some books that I can just quickly share. If you were here for the previous session, you might have seen some of these already, but I'll share them also. Anyway, just books that I've been reading lately that I really like is one is Yehudi Medgado's Fun World, about a sort of theme park that gets invaded by aliens. Really great, fun, kind of cartoony book. You'll notice a theme of like very cartoony characters in all of these books that I really like a lot. Aster and the Mixed Up Magic is a sequel to the Accidental Magic. And it's like sort of kind of like Hilda in a way, where about a girl and her family who moved to like a new place, and it turns out to be very magical, and there's full of kind of like magical creatures and monsters and things. I've been reading the new Bug Boys. I just got this from the library, the new Bug Boys collection by Laura Netzker. That's really great. Kind of short stories. Each chapter is this kind of standalone story. And then Brina Bard's Trespassers, which is a sort of mystery story about these two kids who are away on vacation with their families, and they find this kind of mysterious house, and they decide they need to investigate the stories about what that house is and how it got there. And so right now I'm reading a lot of books that are like the book I'm making, because I find that it's helpful to me as I go. Cartooning is a very tedious act, and sometimes I feel like these are the books that remind me of what I love about making middle grade cartoonish books. And so reading them helps me kind of keep my drive and my ambition. And there are times where I look at someone's panel and I'm like, oh, that's so good, I got to go draw something. So that helps me a lot. I'm the sort of person where if I read something that's exciting to me, like I have to put it down and go make something, because I'm so revved up by this book. And so reading work that excites me helps my creative process. And so yeah, and then I'm watching a ton of cartoons right now too.
We just had a couple new folks join the chat. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. We're talking with Jarod Roselló and Edgar Camacho about their graphic novels with Top Shelf. I'd like to show a little bit of art. Edgar, one of the things we talk about the most with your book is the food, because that's such an important part of the storyline. And it's also such a wonderful part of your artwork, that we get to see delicious food. And, the story is about two young adults who open up a food truck, and it becomes a wild hit, a very, very popular very quickly. And, you know, have you always been somebody who liked to draw food? Did you want to make a
Yes.
story for that reason?
Yes, I love food. I love eating a lot and go and have a passion, for watching YouTube videos of how to cook hamburgers, steaks, and everything, And yes, I love to draw food. And in my family, on my mother's side, they are tough when it comes to judge the food. And here in Mexico, it's an old saying that says, if you know how to cook, you can marry it now. A saying like, love comes to the mouth, first. So if you can cook, you can do anything you want to do in your life. So that's part of my life and my everyday life. The food is present and I love it. Drawing is very hard, and at the first I want to do it when I was experimenting with the style. I was doing a test in black and white, but it doesn't work because for me, at least, food has to be in color. It has to be, to look tasty, to look like you want something that you wanna eat, and yeah.
Well, it's definitely one of the things that is most universally, it's a part of Mexican culture that has reached the farthest in the United States. I think for some Americans in other parts of the US, it's the first encounter with Mexican culture that they have is in food. Uh, and so, I think sometimes people are concerned that it's a stereotype. That's the only thing that you know about Mexicans, right? Is tacos or whatever.
Tacos.
But what I love about this book is that it's not ashamed of that, but it really embraces that, and it also shows all these other wonderful parts of being young in Mexico, and the hard parts. But it's a three-dimensional kind of a world, and you get to see people falling in love and going to a rock and roll show, and you know, dealing with a crummy job, and all of these things that are very universal for even an Anglo like me, um, and a celebration of a community culture and things that you inherit from your grandparents and so on. Jared, there's not a lot of food scenes in book one, but we could show a little glimpse of the pastelito monster in book two, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to talk about that scene for a minute?
Yeah, it's, the most beloved piece of food for a Cuban is your pastelitos. And so this is a pastelito monster. It's a cheese and guava monster that comes to life and the kids have to defeat it. But it's simultaneously, that's right, yeah, guayaba y queso. And the kids have to defeat it, but it's, traumatizing to them to have to defeat their favorite food at the same time. so it's, you don't see it here because it's not yet colored, but it has cream cheese teeth and guava limbs. So
And it leaves behind a little trail of fruity puddles.
it does, yeah. And there's
Guayaba tracks.
yeah, it leaves some guayaba tracks. So it's one of those like delicious and horrifying battles.
And just to be clear, for those of you watching at home, it will be in color in the final book. These are just some early images.
Yeah.
Here's a full color scene from the first Red Panda book, for those of you who are new to the series. Somebody named Keela in the audience, hey, is asking about, have you seen Solar Opposites, Jared?
Oh yes, yeah. I responded. I haven't seen Solar Opposites. No, it's on my list though. But I am watching. I just finished Kid Cosmic, and I'm watching City of Ghosts on Netflix, which both are incredible. In case anybody wants to talk cartoons.
Edgar, I have a question about Texas and this map that you put into Onion Skin, which I did not notice when we were putting the book together, but I was looking back on it just now during this conversation. And let me pull it up here so everybody can see what we're talking about. I lost it. You know the map that I'm talking about?
Yes.
And
It's it's a representation of the ancient Mexico, you know, that what would have happened if the territory had not been sold to the United States, you know, if Texas and everything on the map that now belongs to the United States belongs to Mexico, you know, like California and a lot of land that in one point was part of the Mexico and now is from the United States, you know. And for me, it's just like it is a fantastic world that is not the actual world that we are living now, you know, because it has Texas on the side of Mexico still, you know, and that's the fantastic universe I creating, you know. In my other stories is the same map, is the same place where my other work happened. So it's just this universe I created and this map where Mexico has the territory that sold to the United States.
okay, I think I finally found it. Sorry for taking so long.
Don't worry.
Here we go. So this is based on the historical borders of Mexico.
Yes. Yes, and the names of the places is just like they don't call that's not the names now. You know, like Nueva Vizcaya is not exist anymore, and Mexico City is a little smaller now, and the word Mexico with the J, you know, is that's how I was writing a long time ago, you know. Now it's with an X, but I love a lot with this Mexico with the J.
Awesome. Let's see. Is there any more particular pages that you want to show off that you're really proud of and talk about in our last few minutes here?
In my book, in page, I'm not sure, page 19, where Nera is getting up in her house in the food truck.
All right.
Yeah, that's the one.
So this is
that
our
was
introduction to Nera.
His introduction of the character, and those pages were one of the first that I draw. And in the first version of the book was a comic book that I made for my girlfriend, you know, where I was drawing her and imagine how she was getting up to bed to go to work. And that's where I draw these scenes and then I put it on skin. You know, that comic book I give to her as a birthday present, you know, and then I return to onion skin. And I really love that page. I think it reflects the essence of the character and the whole book.
Waking up inside of a food truck is pretty unusual.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to make the reader curious, like what's going on here? What is going on in her life that this is what she wakes up to?
Yes.
And we have to find out the answers. Jared,
I
do you
love
want to?
that.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say that I love that panel structure on page 19 because it could have so easily just been like one full page image, but those like broken up panels down at the bottom, like draw attention to the scenes there, but also like, I don't know, they ask us, I think, to like linger longer in this moment too, which I really like just the sort of movement from the last 2 pages into this one. So
yeah, I love to do that a lot. You know,
yeah.
to break one page in small panels to make I don't know, another effect of reading. I don't know. I think it's very effective.
Yeah, I stayed here a lot on this page, and it's such a nice, like the composition of the whole page is really nice, like the way the whole page moves, and then those panels down at the bottom. But yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Edgar, do you think that Nera used to be a dancer?
It is possible, you know, as a free spirit, it's the opposite of Roland, and Roland is just like a box, you know, like a square box standing, like the monolith on Space Oddity, you know, like that thing, black. And Nera is the opposite, you know, she's like everywhere. So that is very possible.
Something about the way that she moves here. It's just almost one curve from her fingertips all the way down to her toes.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, my wife used to be a dancer, and it's the same sort of, just a way that you move through the world and the way that you hold your body when you take dance classes.
Yes, it's not the same as a normal person.
Jarod, do you have any particular pages that you want to show off to the librarians here before we go?
Yeah, I guess I have one page that when I drew it, I was really proud of myself. It's page 85 of the first Red Panda book. It's the title page to chapter 6, where they wake up and it's summer and it's, you know, tropical climate, but it's snowy out. And I remember we were talking earlier about this idea of a snowy world. Of course, when I would draw snowy worlds as a kid, it was always like snow on pine trees and everything. And this, I don't know, it felt for me like a chance to sort of draw snow on palm trees instead. And of course, I had no idea how snow would sit on a palm tree or how snow sits at all, really. And so, I don't know, I was really proud of myself when I drew this because it felt like a collision of that like image of like a perfect snowy day, but the setting was still home, you know, still the palm trees, still the sort of warm colors and stuff. So yeah.
I love the way that your characters, Jarod, have different shapes and sort of different levels of complexity based on how close or how far away we are. You know, sometimes the arms and legs are just a single line, but sometimes they thicken up and, you know, they have fingers, and sometimes they don't, just based on what they need to do for the layout.
Yeah, and it's especially challenging with noodly limbed characters because it gets really hard to draw their limbs when they're tiny. And so this was just my solution. I'll just do stick limbs, which I feel like cartooning is always about how do I capture the essence of this gesture, this moment, this scene, this feeling, more than it is about, is this accurate and consistent in some ways, if that makes sense. And so you have to kind of find that essence sometimes, even if it means sort of breaking the rules.
Yeah, I think every page of Red Panda and Moon Bear is all about that. You know, I think about like the dog characters, their faces don't make any sense, really, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because the dogs have like a smiling mouth or a mouth that opens and talks, but it's not
on their
where
snout.
the mouth should be.
Right, it's further in their head. Let me tell you that I think about that every single time I draw them. I'm like, this is not where the mouth goes. And I'm like, but it looks better here, so whatever.
It looks good.
Yeah, this is fine. Yeah. If I can ever get it in the snout, I'll try to, but if I can't, it's okay too. Yeah. I'm just sort of flipping through my own book now and realizing how many of these characters are like characters I first drew in my sketchbook when I was like 10, 11, 12. And that at the time I probably would have felt they would have never seen the light of day. And now here they are in a book and kids around the country are reading them. And so.
Oh, here's the famous Yeti.
Yeah, there's the Yeti.
Is this the only page that the Yeti is on?
No, he comes back at the end of the chapter. He adopts the little little ice cream. Yeah.
That's right. Oh, and I love these little guys. The evil, fluffy monsters.
Little evil puffs, yeah.
We got some more.
So these are the creatures that eat the universe, and then the ones that they had to repair the holes that they did.
Right.
And I remember when I drew those scenes, I was like, should I draw the page that's behind this page in the book showing through the hole? So it looks like there's an actual hole in the page, but then that seemed too confusing. So I didn't do it.
It sounds great. It sounds great.
Yeah.
Effect, no?
I know, yeah. I was like, but that doesn't make sense in the reality of the book, because then they're all characters in a, right? You start spiraling into cartoon into cartoon logic.
The cartoon madness.
Yeah.
Edgar, I want to show off the dream sequences from Onion Skin because they have a totally different look and color palette. And I think they're really, really beautiful.
Yeah, in the dream sequence, I love how to work with the blues and the reds, like neon bright colors. And here in the first version of the book in Mexico, there are more bright colors. It was like RGB, like a computer RGB, very bright in your eyes. So for this version, it had a filter that doesn't have that effect. But I think with this palette, I want to represent that, the big space of a dream, like you're not sure what are you looking at. You remember some details of your dream, not the whole thing. So that's why the lion has these marks in his eyes, these blue marks to represent that that's what he's going to remember the most. And then in the book later makes sense why he remembered that.
I think the more times that people spend with these books, the more really clever things like that they will find. A comic book, a graphic novel is something that you can read really quickly, which is one of the good and bad things about comics. But that means that you can read it 2 or 3 times quickly, and each time that you read it, you're going to see things that the artist put in there, and connections that you didn't see the first time around. So that's something that I always like to recommend to readers is, take the time, take the chance to look at it again. And because every page that you look at took hours and hours or days and days for the artist to make it, even though you might read it in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. I feel like when you read a prose book, you always read one word, then the next word, then the next word. And so you read all the words. But when you read a comic, you look at an image and you get a sense of what's happening in that image, but you don't see everything in that image, in that panel. And then you move on. And so if you go back, there's always things there, and everything there was chosen and selected and purposefully created and put there in its place. And so.
Even if it was all improvisational in some
Yeah,
cases.
I mean, yeah, I feel like improvisation is a big part of drawing comics. You have to choose on the spot. Like you didn't realize that, oh, I was going to need to decide what the door of this bedroom looks like. And now in that moment, you have to pick. And sometimes you forget 3 chapters later that you already decided you would draw differently.
yes.
And you hope your editor catches that.
That's the magic of drawing comics.
Yeah.
Well, I think both of you teach us a really good lesson, which is that comics don't have to be totally consistent and logical, because life isn't always consistent and logical, especially when you're young. And if we lose sight of that magic, then we're losing a big part of what makes us human.
Well said.
Well, thank you, Jarod and Edgar, for taking time out of your day to talk to me and to all these wonderful librarians who are doing probably the hardest year of their lives trying to be a librarian during a pandemic. But thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Thank you for your questions. Red Panda and Moon Bear is going to be out in book 2 in January, and Onion Skin by Edgar Camacho is coming to you next month in May. So thank you so much, and hopefully we can see you in person at the next TLA, because we can't wait to say thank you for supporting us and to give you some more great books.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
All right. See you later, guys.